Imagine waking up to the sound of waves outside your bedroom window, sipping your morning coffee on a sun-drenched terrace, knowing that the home you are sitting in, the home you actually own, cost you less than most people spend on a mid-range car back in the United States. That is not a fantasy. That is retirement in 2026, and today I am going to show you exactly where it is happening. Hey everyone, I am Julia, and if you are new here, welcome. I travel the world full-time. I write about expat life, love, and the very real art of living well on less. And I have spent the last several years doing deep dives into places where your retirement savings can stretch so far, you will wonder why you ever thought you needed to stay put. Today, we are going into the top 10 countries where you can still, yes, still in 2026, find a legitimate, livable, even beautiful home for $50,000 or less. I am talking real estate you can actually buy in places real people are actually moving to, with neighborhoods that have character and warmth and a life that is waiting for you to step into it. This is not a listicle. This is a conversation. So settle in, because we are going around the world together. Let us begin in Portugal, because honestly, how could we not? Portugal has been on every retirement radar for the better part of a decade now, and every single year I hear someone say, the secret is out, the prices are up, it is over. And every single year I come back and find pockets of this breathtaking country where $50,000 still gets you something real. Now, I want to be honest with you, the way I always am. If you walk into Lisbon with $50,000 and expect to buy a flat in Alfama with a river view, you are going to be disappointed. Lisbon has genuinely become expensive. Porto has followed, but Portugal is not Lisbon and Porto. Portugal is a country of ancient villages, quiet hilltop towns, and rolling countryside that the property developers have not fully discovered yet. And in those places, $50,000 opens doors that will genuinely surprise you. The interior of Portugal, the Alentejo region in particular, is where this budget becomes a superpower. Alentejo is vast and golden, full of cork forests and lavender fields, medieval castles sitting on hilltops, and little whitewashed towns where the pace of life is so slow it feels like a different era. In towns like Mertola, Moura, Porto Alegre, and Serpa, you can find stone village houses for $30,000 to $50,000 that have character and history baked into every wall. Some of them need work, yes, but even accounting for renovation costs, you are still coming in well under what you would spend in most Western European cities for a parking space. What makes Portugal so compelling beyond the price tag is the lifestyle infrastructure. Portugal consistently ranks as one of the safest countries in the world. The healthcare system, while not perfect, is accessible, and as a legal resident, you can access the National Health Service at a fraction of what you would pay privately. The food is extraordinary in the most humble, unpretentious way: grilled fish, fresh bread, wine that costs almost nothing, and a culture that genuinely values sitting at a table for 2 hours and enjoying a meal rather than rushing through it. The weather in the south of Portugal is remarkable. If you settle in the Alentejo or the Algarve hinterland, you are looking at around 300 days of sunshine per year. Winters are mild. Summers are hot, but the kind of dry heat that does not suffocate you the way humidity does. For those of you who are single and retired and wondering about the social scene, this is something I get asked about constantly. Portugal has a thriving expat community, particularly in and around Tavira in the eastern Algarve, which has become something of a haven for retirees from the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, and increasingly North America. But beyond the expat bubble, Portuguese people are genuinely warm and welcoming, and learning even a little bit of the language opens up social connections that feel meaningful rather than transactional. The legal pathway for residency, particularly the passive income visa, which replaced the famous golden visa route for most retirees, requires showing proof of regular income and is absolutely achievable for someone with Social Security and a small pension or investment income. Portugal does tax foreign income now through its reformed NHR scheme, so please do your homework with a tax advisor, but the overall picture remains one of the most accessible in Europe. If you are on a $50,000 budget and Portugal speaks to your soul, and for a lot of people, it just does, There is something about Portugal that feels like coming home even when it is your first time. Then the interior towns are your target. Go in the shoulder season, spend 2 weeks driving around the Alentejo, eat at the local tasca in every village, talk to people. You will know within days whether this is your place. Country number 2, Mexico, more nuanced than the headlines. Moving across the Atlantic and heading west, we land in Mexico, a country that the retirement world has adored for generations, but that I think deserves a more nuanced conversation than it usually gets, especially on YouTube. Mexico is enormous. It has the Sierra Madre Mountains, the Pacific Coast, the Gulf of Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, colonial highlands, desert, jungle, and everything in between. When people talk about retiring in Mexico, they are really talking about a dozen different countries within one country, and that matters enormously when we are talking about a $50,000 property budget. Let me start with the obvious. The places you have already heard of, Puerto Vallarta, San Miguel de Allende, Playa del Carmen, have been discovered thoroughly. Prices in San Miguel de Allende in particular have reached levels that would make a California retiree feel vaguely at home in the worst possible way. We are not going there today. Where your $50,000 still works beautifully in Mexico is in the places that have not yet been colonized by the lifestyle influencer industrial complex. Let me paint you a few pictures. The state of Yucatan, not the resort strip of Cancun, but the actual heartland of Yucatan, is one of the most underrated retirement destinations on the planet right now. The capital city of Mérida is colonial, cultured, clean, and has a robust expat community without having lost its identity. But even Mérida proper is starting to see prices climb in the historic centro. Go 30 minutes outside of Mérida into the surrounding pueblos, towns like Izamal, Motul, Acance, and $50,000 buys you a colonial-style home with high ceilings, a courtyard, and a neighborhood where you know the people on your street by name. The state of Oaxaca offers something similar, but with a completely different flavor. Oaxaca is indigenous, artistic, culinarily extraordinary. It is the home of mole and mezcal, and some of the most vibrant craft traditions in the Americas. The city itself has seen some price increases, but the valleys around it and the smaller towns within an hour's drive offer real estate at prices that feel almost impossible from a North American perspective. For those who want the coast, and I know a lot of you do, the Pacific coast of Oaxaca State, particularly the Huatulco Bay area, rather than the backpacker scene of Zipolite or Puerto Escondido, has seen investment in infrastructure without the corresponding explosion in property prices that happened in more famous resort towns. A modest but well-built home or condo in the Huatulco Bays can absolutely fall within the $50,000 range, especially if you are buying in the resale market from someone who purchased years ago and is ready to move on. Now I want to address something directly, because I owe you that. Mexico's security situation is real. It varies enormously by region, and it should absolutely factor into your decision. The states I have mentioned, Yucatan and Oaxaca, are consistently among the safest in the country. The U.S. State Department's travel advisories are a starting point, not an endpoint. I would encourage you to spend real time in any community before committing, join expat forums specific to the region, and build a network on the ground. Fear of Mexico in general is often overblown by people who have never been, but a naive dismissal of any caution is equally unhelpful. What makes Mexico deeply livable for retirees beyond the price point is the warmth of Mexican culture. Family is central, hospitality is genuine, and the sensory richness of daily life, the markets, the food, the music, the festivals, gives retired life in Mexico a texture and aliveness that a lot of retirees in more sanitized environments never experience. The healthcare situation has also improved significantly. Mexico now has world-class private hospitals at a fraction of U.S. costs in cities like Mérida, Guadalajara, and Oaxaca. Country number 3, Colombia, the most underestimated destination on this list. If I had to pick the single most underestimated retirement destination on this entire list, it would be Colombia. And I say that fully aware that the word Colombia still triggers a certain hesitation in people of a particular generation who remember it only through a very specific and very dated lens. The Colombia of 2026 is a different story, and it is one of the most fascinating transformations in modern travel history. Let us start with Medellin, because Medellin is the story that changed the conversation. This city, once considered one of the most dangerous places on earth, has spent 2 decades reinventing itself with an investment in education, public infrastructure, urban design, and community development that has turned it into a genuinely world-class city. Medellin was named the most innovative city in the world by the Urban Land Institute. It has a metro system that shames most North American cities. It has an aerial gondola network connecting formerly isolated hillside communities to the city center. And it has a climate, sitting at around 1,500 meters elevation in a valley, that locals call the eternal spring because the temperature hovers between about 18 and 28 degrees Celsius year-round, every single day, with no real winter and no brutal tropical heat. In Medellin's established expat neighborhoods like El Poblado and Laureles, a $50,000 budget will get you a small but modern apartment. But push slightly outward to areas like Envigado, technically a separate municipality but functionally part of the greater Medellin urban area, and that budget stretches considerably further. Envigado is quieter, more Colombian, less dominated by expat bars, and deeply pleasant to live in. Beyond Medellin, Colombia's coffee region, the so-called Eje Cafetero, centering on towns like Salento, Finlandia, and the city of Manizales, offers a completely different retirement fantasy. Picture yourself in a charming colonial town surrounded by cloud forest and coffee fincas, where the local market sells produce you have never seen before at prices that seem like a joke, where the air is clean and cool, and where the warmth of the Paisa culture, the regional culture of this part of Colombia, surrounds you daily. Property in smaller coffee region towns can be astonishingly affordable within our budget range. For those who want the Caribbean, Colombia's coast delivers, and it delivers differently from the sanitized resort experience of places like Cancun. Cartagena's walled historic city has become expensive and frankly a bit of a tourist theme park, but Santa Marta, 200 kilometers to the east, offers a more authentic Caribbean experience with a growing expat community, a beautiful bay, access to the stunning Tayrona National Park, and property that still in 2026 falls well within the $50,000 range in residential neighborhoods away from the tourist center. The legal pathway to Colombian residency is also one of the more straightforward in Latin America. The pensioner visa, known as the visa de pensionado, requires proof of a pension income of approximately 3 times the Colombian minimum wage, a modest bar for most Western retirees, and offers a path to permanent residency after 5 years and citizenship after 5 more. The cost of living in Colombia, even in a city as developed as Medellin, is dramatically lower than North America or Western Europe. A couple can live extraordinarily well, with domestic help, regular restaurant meals, travel within the country, on a budget that would feel impossibly tight in Toronto or London. I want to be real with you again. Colombia does still have areas with security challenges, but the cities and regions I have described have improved enormously and have large established communities of expats and digital nomads who can give you genuine, current, on-the-ground assessments. Do not let a 30-year-old reputation keep you from one of the most vibrant, beautiful, and genuinely welcoming countries in the world. Country number 4, North Macedonia, the European dark horse. I am going to do something now that I love doing on this channel, which is introduce you to a place you probably were not expecting. Welcome to North Macedonia, and I promise you by the end of this section, you are going to be looking it up on a map and wondering why you had never thought about it before. North Macedonia is a small landlocked country in the heart of the Balkans, bordered by Serbia to the north, Kosovo to the northwest, Albania to the west, Greece to the south, and Bulgaria to the east. It joined NATO in 2020 and is a candidate country for European Union membership, which is significant because it means the rule of law, property rights, and institutional stability are all trending firmly in the right direction. The capital, Skopje, is strange and fascinating. a city that undertook a massive and somewhat Baroque architectural project in the 2010s called Skopje 2014, filling the city center with neoclassical statues and bridges that feel slightly surreal but give the city an unmistakable character. Beyond the theatrics of the capital, Skopje functions as a real, affordable European city with a young, educated, English-speaking population, excellent food, and a cafe culture that could compete with any city in the region. But it is outside of Skopje that North Macedonia truly shines for the retiree with our budget. The city of Ohrid, sitting on the shore of Lake Ohrid, one of the oldest and deepest lakes in Europe and a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is one of the most beautiful small cities on the continent, and almost nobody from outside the region knows about it. Ohrid has an old town of cobblestoned lanes, Byzantine churches perched on cliffs above the impossibly blue-green lake, medieval fortress walls, and a seafront promenade that on a summer evening feels like the Mediterranean for a fraction of the price. In Ohrid and the surrounding lakeshore villages, $50,000 buys you an apartment with a lake view. Not a view of a lake from a distance, a lake view from your window, in a UNESCO heritage town in Europe. The surrounding mountains are equally extraordinary. Mavrovo National Park to the west is one of the best-kept secrets in European skiing and summer hiking, and Pelister National Park in the south has ancient glacial lakes and walking trails through beech and pine forests that see almost no international visitors. The cost of living in North Macedonia is among the lowest in Europe. A restaurant meal that would cost you $30 in Ljubljana or $40 in Prague costs $5 or $6 in Skopje or Ohrid. Healthcare is accessible and improving. The language is a South Slavic language related to Bulgarian and Serbian. While learning it is not strictly necessary in urban areas where English is widely spoken, the locals appreciate any effort enormously, and the language is beautiful. For people who are drawn to Europe but feel priced out of the Western European dream, North Macedonia offers something genuinely remarkable: EU-adjacent stability, European lifestyle, extraordinary natural beauty, and a property market that has not yet caught the attention of international investors in force. That will change. For now, the window is open, and a $50,000 budget opens it very wide indeed. Country number 5, Vietnam, where your dollar feels like a fortune. We move now to Southeast Asia because no honest conversation about affordable retirement in 2026 can skip it, and within Southeast Asia, Vietnam deserves its own chapter. Vietnam is one of those places that ruins you for everywhere else. Once you have lived there for any meaningful period of time, the sensory richness, the food, the landscape, the energy, the sheer density of beauty and strangeness and life, it recalibrates your baseline for what daily life can feel like. I say this as someone who has spent real time there, not as someone selling you a fantasy. Now, the important thing to understand about Vietnam and property is that the rules are different here. Vietnamese law does not allow foreigners to own freehold land. The land ultimately belongs to the state. However, foreigners can own apartments and condominiums with a 50-year lease that is renewable, and this has been the standard legal mechanism through which tens of thousands of expats have purchased property in Vietnam. There are also mechanisms for long-term rental contracts that function practically like ownership. The legal landscape is worth understanding thoroughly with a local lawyer, but it is navigable and many people do it successfully every year. Within that framework, what does $50,000 get you in Vietnam? Quite a lot, depending on where you are looking. In Ho Chi Minh City, the southern metropolis that pulses with commercial energy, $50,000 in a legitimate condominium development puts you in a smaller unit in a decent but not luxury complex, in a neighborhood that has all the infrastructure of urban life. The city is enormous, fascinating, exhausting, and alive in a way that few cities in the world can match. Hanoi is a different animal entirely, older, more northern in its character, cooler in climate, with a distinct French colonial architectural inheritance and a lake-centered old quarter that is genuinely beautiful. Property prices in Hanoi have climbed, but outer districts within the city still offer units in the $50,000 range. But the conversation about Vietnam retirement gets truly exciting when you move away from the megacities. Da Nang, the central coastal city that sits between the mountains and the South China Sea, has developed an extraordinary expat infrastructure in the last decade. It has direct international flights, a beautiful beach, a new city that is clean and well organized, an ancient town called Hoi An just 30 kilometers away that is perhaps the most charming historic settlement in all of Southeast Asia, and a climate that is warm year-round with a rainy season in the autumn that is genuinely the only caveat. In Da Nang's residential areas and in the new developments along the coast, $50,000 is a real figure for a condominium unit. Hoi An itself has a property market worth understanding. While the ancient town is protected and cannot be built in, the surrounding areas have seen significant residential development, and the combination of living in Hoi An's orbit while owning in a nearby development is one of the most appealing retirement scenarios in all of Asia. The cost of living in Vietnam is dramatically lower than North America or Europe. A genuinely excellent meal in Vietnam costs $1 to $3. Monthly living costs for a retiree living comfortably, including housing costs, food, transport, and entertainment, can easily fall under $1,000 a month in most cities outside of the expat bubble. Vietnamese culture is ancient, complex, and deeply rewarding to engage with. The country went through extraordinary trauma in the 20th century, but the Vietnamese people's relationship with their history, with foreigners, and with the future is remarkably forward-looking and generous. Learning even a few phrases of Vietnamese, one of the tonal languages, which I acknowledge is genuinely challenging, produces a warmth in people that is immediate and wonderful. The social scene for retirees is robust in Da Nang and Ho Chi Minh City particularly, with large English-speaking expat communities, active social clubs, and a calendar of events that keeps life interesting. Vietnam does not yet have a formal retirement visa. This is a gap in its expat infrastructure that has been discussed for years and may well change. But most long-term residents operate on business or investor visas or through annual tourist visa renewals supplemented by visa runs to neighboring countries, which is a very common practice. Country number 6, North Cyprus, the Mediterranean secret. I have been watching North Cyprus become an increasingly talked about destination over the last 2 years, and while it deserves the attention, I want to give you the full picture, the beautiful parts and the complicated parts, because that is how you make a real decision. North Cyprus is the northern third of the island of Cyprus, which has been politically divided since 1974. It is administered by the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which is recognized internationally only by Turkey. This political situation is genuinely complicated and has real practical implications for property buyers, which I will address directly. But it also creates a situation where an extraordinarily beautiful Mediterranean island, with the same climate, the same crystal clear sea, the same ancient ruins and golden beaches as the Greek Cypriot South, has property prices that are a fraction of what you would pay anywhere else in the Mediterranean. Let me paint the picture first. Northern Cyprus has some of the most beautiful beaches in the Mediterranean, long stretches of wild, undeveloped coastline that remain untouched by the kind of mass tourism infrastructure that has consumed much of the Spanish and Greek coasts. The Karpaz Peninsula in the far north is almost otherworldly in its beauty, a long, thin finger of land jutting into the sea, with deserted beaches, ancient monasteries, and wild donkeys roaming freely. The Kyrenia mountain range runs along the northern coast, dotted with crusader castles and offering views over the sea that are genuinely breathtaking. The main city of Kyrenia, known locally as Gurney, is one of the prettiest harbor towns in the Mediterranean. Its horseshoe harbor, ringed with restaurants and overlooked by a crusader castle, has been drawing visitors for centuries, and now draws retirees in significant numbers from the UK, mainland Europe, and increasingly Russia, Iran, and beyond. In and around Kyrenia, in coastal towns like Alsancak, Lapta, and Esentepe, $50,000 can buy a small apartment with a sea view or a garden plot. For slightly more, and we are still talking about very modest sums by Western European standards, you can find detached villas. The property market in North Cyprus operates primarily in British pounds, a legacy of the large British expat community that has been here for decades. Now the complications. Because of the island's division and the legal uncertainties that arise from it, buying property in North Cyprus requires extremely careful due diligence. There are two categories of property: land that has always been Turkish Cypriot, which has a clean and uncontested legal title, and land that was previously owned by Greek Cypriots who fled south in 1974, which carries legal risks because those original owners or their descendants may have claims. Buying in the latter category has caused significant problems for some buyers, including legal challenges in British courts. The absolute golden rule is to work exclusively with properties that have clean Turkish Cypriot title deeds, and to use a qualified local lawyer, not the developer's lawyer, to verify this thoroughly. With proper legal guidance, buying property in North Cyprus is done safely and regularly by thousands of foreign buyers every year. The key is not skipping the homework. Do not let anyone rush you. Do not sign anything you do not understand, and do not buy from anyone unwilling to provide full title deed verification. With those caveats stated, North Cyprus offers something genuinely extraordinary: Mediterranean climate, stunning scenery, good food, low cost of living, warm culture, and properties within the $50,000 range that would cost 5 to 10 times as much across the water in mainland Cyprus or Greece. The lifestyle, once you are settled, is idyllic. Warm winters, long summers, fresh seafood, and a pace of life that feels like the Mediterranean as it used to be before the tourist hordes arrived. Country number 7, Georgia, the Caucasus surprise. If North Macedonia was the European dark horse, Georgia is the wild card that makes everyone's jaw drop when I show them the numbers. And I am talking about the country, the ancient Caucasus nation between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, not the American state, though the confusion is always good for a laugh. Georgia sits at one of the world's great crossroads, where Europe meets Asia, where the Orthodox Christian world meets the Islamic world, where ancient civilizations left layers upon layers of fortresses, monasteries, wine caves, and Silk Road trading towns. It is a country of staggering natural diversity: subtropical Black Sea coast, alpine meadows with glaciers visible from mountain villages, semi-arid valleys, and river gorges so dramatic they belong in a fantasy novel. Tbilisi, the capital, is a city unlike anything in Western Europe or North America. Its old town, Abanat Ubani, the Sulphur Bath District, is a tangle of wooden balconied houses overhanging narrow lanes, Persian-style domed bathhouses with hot sulfur spring water pouring through them, ancient churches standing shoulder to shoulder with mosques and synagogues, a medieval fortress on the cliff above the old town, and a cafe culture that has exploded in the last 10 years as Tbilisi has become one of the most fashionable creative destinations in the world for artists, musicians, and digital nomads. In Tbilisi, $50,000 in 2026 buys you a legitimate apartment in a neighborhood with character and infrastructure. In the Old Town or in the fashionable Vera or Vake districts, you are talking about a modest flat, but it is a real flat in one of the most interesting cities in the world. Outside of Tbilisi, in regional towns like Kutaisi, the ancient capital that now has an international airport and a charming medieval center, or in Batumi on the Black Sea coast, or in the wine region of Kakheti in the east, $50,000 goes considerably further. Batumi deserves a special mention because it is genuinely extraordinary and almost unknown to most Western audiences. It is a subtropical resort city on the Black Sea that has been developed intensively in the last 15 years, with a seafront boulevard, high-rise residential towers with sea views, casinos, botanical gardens, and palm trees. Apartments in Batumi's newer developments fall well within the $50,000 range and offer Black Sea views that would cost multiples of that in any other Mediterranean context. The city has a slightly surreal energy, part Soviet sanatorium town, part Dubai-style development experiment, but it is alive, warm, and strangely compelling. Georgia's approach to foreign buyers is one of the most open in the world. There are virtually no restrictions on foreigners purchasing property. The process is straightforward, and the country has a remarkably simple flat tax system with low rates. The concept of residency through property investment exists, And Georgia has also become famous for allowing citizens of many countries, including the US, UK, and EU member states, to live and work in Georgia for up to a year without a visa, which makes it exceptionally accessible for a trial run before committing. The food and wine culture of Georgia is arguably the most underrated in the world. Georgia is widely considered to be the birthplace of wine, with a winemaking tradition going back 8,000 years, using the Kuvevri clay vessel method that has been inscribed on UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage List. The food, khachapuri, khinkali, lobiani, the extraordinary walnut-based dishes, is deeply satisfying and utterly unlike anything you will find in Western Europe. And it is cheap. Incredibly cheap by any comparison. Country number 8, the Philippines, island paradise on a budget. The Philippines is one of those destinations that people who have been there rave about, and people who have not been there slightly underestimate, usually because of a vague impression formed from geography lessons rather than lived experience. 7,600 islands, a tropical climate, one of the strongest English-speaking populations in Asia, an exceptionally warm and outgoing culture, and property prices that remain remarkably accessible. The Philippines is a serious retirement destination and one that deserves far more attention than it gets in mainstream Western conversations. Let me address the elephant in the room. Some parts of the Philippines have genuine security challenges, specifically some areas of Mindanao in the south. But the Philippines is a vast archipelago, and the areas that are both safe and extraordinary for retirement are extensive. Luzon Island, the largest island, home to Manila, Cebu in the Visayas, Bohol, Palawan, Siargao, the Ilocos Coast, the Cordillera Highlands. These are all distinct environments, each with their own character, climate, and community. For property buyers, the Philippine legal framework has a specific structure. Foreigners cannot own land outright in the Philippines. Only Filipino citizens or corporations with majority Filipino ownership can do so. However, foreigners can own condominium units outright, provided the foreign ownership in any given condominium building does not exceed 40% of the total units. This 40% rule means that, in practice, foreigners regularly and legally purchase condo units across the Philippines, particularly in established urban and resort areas. For those who fall in love with land and a house on it, which many retirees do because who doesn't want a garden and space, the common legal mechanism is a long-term lease, typically lasting 50 years with an option to extend for another 25. This is how many expats effectively manage ownership of a landed property in the Philippines, and when structured correctly with a qualified Philippine attorney, it provides genuine security. Within the $50,000 range, your options in the Philippines are genuinely exciting. In Metro Cebu, the country's second city, sitting on an island that combines urban amenities with access to extraordinary diving, beaches, and island hopping, $50,000 in the condominium market gets you a modern unit in a mid-range development with the features you would expect: pool, gym, security. Cebu has international flights, excellent private hospitals, a large expat community, and a cost of living that allows a comfortable lifestyle on modest retirement income. For a completely different vibe, Bohol, the neighboring island famous for its chocolate hills and tarsier primates, has a growing retirement community and a more relaxed, rural meets beach character. Property here is generally less expensive than Cebu, and the island's smaller scale makes it easier to integrate into local community life. The Philippines has one of the world's most retiree-friendly programs, the Special Resident Retirees Visa, known as the SRRV, administered by the Philippine Retirement Authority. This visa grants indefinite stay in the Philippines and comes with significant practical benefits. For those aged 50 and above with a pension, the required bank deposit is $10,000. For those without a pension, the deposit requirement is higher. This deposit earns interest, is refundable if you leave the Philippines permanently, and provides a genuine, stable legal status that many other retirement visa programs in Asia do not offer. The warmth of Filipino culture is something that genuinely sets the Philippines apart. The Philippines was a Spanish colony for 300 years, and then an American territory for 48 years. And this history has produced a culture that blends Southeast Asian community values with Catholic traditions and a deep familiarity with and genuine affection for Western visitors. English is an official language and is spoken widely across generations. The combination of linguistic accessibility, cultural warmth, and natural beauty makes the Philippines one of the more emotionally easy transitions for a Western retiree. Country number 9, Albania, Europe's final frontier of affordable living. We are coming into the home stretch now, and I have saved some of my favorites for last. Albania. Let me tell you about Albania. Albania spent decades as one of the most isolated countries in the world. Under Enver Hoxha's communist government, Albania was so completely closed that its citizens were not permitted to own cars or travel abroad, and the country constructed over 700,000 concrete bunkers across the landscape, visible to this day, a physical monument to the paranoia of an era. When the communist regime finally collapsed in the early 1990s, Albania faced a painful transition, but it has been transformed, and the transformation of the last 20 years, and particularly the last 10, is one of the most remarkable stories in European development. Albania is now a NATO member, an EU accession candidate, and accession negotiations have been progressing meaningfully, and a country that has invested heavily in its tourism infrastructure, its coastline, and its urban centers. And crucially for our purposes, despite all of this progress, the property prices have not yet caught up to where they eventually will be. The Albanian Riviera, the stretch of Ionian coastline running south from the city of Vlora to the Greek border, is, and I do not say this lightly, one of the most beautiful coastlines in the Mediterranean. It combines the watercolor and clarity of the Greek islands with a dramatic mountain backdrop. The mountains quite literally tumble into the sea, and small villages clinging to the cliffs that have barely changed in centuries. Towns like Himara, Dermi, Palasa, and Kaparo offer a Mediterranean experience that feels completely authentic because it has not yet been overrun. In the villages along the Riviera, $50,000 can buy you a stone house that needs work, or a small modern apartment that does not. The range is wide, but the ceiling of what you can find for this budget, sea views, character, location on one of Europe's most beautiful coasts, is genuinely extraordinary. The capital, Tirana, is a different and equally compelling story. Tirana is a city that has been reinventing itself with enormous energy and creativity. It has a pedestrianized boulevard ringed by painted apartment blocks in vivid colors, one of the city's most photographed features, initiated by a former mayor who was also an artist. A thriving cafe and bar scene, excellent restaurants serving Albanian cuisine at prices that feel like a gift, and a young, educated, English-speaking population that gives the city genuine urban vitality. In Tirana's established residential neighborhoods, $50,000 is a genuine entry point for a small but livable apartment. Albania's practical advantages for retirees are significant. Citizens of many Western countries, including the United States and European Union member states, can live in Albania for up to a year without a visa. The process for longer-term residency is straightforward and relatively accessible. The country uses the Albanian lek, which is stable, and the cost of living is among the lowest in Europe, comparable to North Macedonia or Kosovo, significantly below Serbia or Montenegro. The healthcare situation is improving but still limited in rural areas. Most retirees in Albania use a combination of the private healthcare system in Tirana, medical travel to Greece, which is extremely close, with multiple border crossings, and European health insurance coverage. This is a real consideration and needs to be planned for, but it is manageable. The cultural richness of Albania is vastly underappreciated. Albanian is an isolate language, not closely related to any other European language, with a culture, cuisine, and tradition that feels completely distinct even from its Balkan neighbors. The archaeological sites, ancient Butrint near the Greek border, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site of genuine magnificence. The Ottoman-era towns like Berat and Gjirokastra, also UNESCO listed, the national parks and lake districts in the east. All of this adds up to a country that rewards curiosity, and offers a depth of experience that most Western tourists never get to see because they simply are not there yet. That window of a beautiful, safe, accessible European country that has not yet been discovered by the international retirement community in force is closing. Prices on the Albanian Riviera in particular have been rising year on year. But in 2026, the $50,000 budget still opens remarkable doors. Country number 10, Ecuador, the diversity champion. We close our journey in South America, and we close it in what I genuinely believe is one of the most underrated retirement destinations in the entire world. Ecuador is tiny by South American standards, about the size of the state of Nevada, but it packs more diversity into that space than most countries 5 times its size. It has Pacific coastline, Amazon jungle, the high Andes Mountains with their snow-capped volcanoes, and the Galapagos Islands offshore. It has some of the most biodiverse territory on the planet. It uses the US dollar as its official currency, which eliminates exchange rate risk entirely for American retirees. And it has a rich tradition of welcoming foreign retirees with open arms, strong legal frameworks, and a mature expat infrastructure. Cuenca is the city that most people know when they think of Ecuador retirement, and with good reason. Cuenca is a UNESCO World Heritage City in the Southern Highlands, sitting at about 2,500 meters elevation, which gives it a perpetual spring climate not unlike Medellin, with a beautifully preserved colonial center, cathedral domes that have appeared on the covers of travel magazines globally, a thriving arts community, excellent private healthcare, and an English-speaking expat community of several thousand people who have built an extraordinary infrastructure of social clubs, cultural events, and mutual support networks. In Cuenca, $50,000 in the property market is a genuine and meaningful sum. In the city's residential neighborhoods beyond the most expensive historic center blocks, it buys a comfortable apartment. In the surrounding valleys and rural communities within 30 minutes of the city, El Valle, Chalhuabamba, Ricorte, it can buy a small house with land and mountain views. But Ecuador's retirement story does not begin and end with Cuenca. The Pacific coast of Ecuador is strikingly beautiful and dramatically less expensive than equivalent coastlines in Costa Rica or Panama. Towns like Canoa, Manta, and the retirement community of Salinas offer real estate in the $50,000 range with ocean access, warm water year-round, and a lifestyle that combines beach living with genuine engagement with Ecuadorian coastal culture. For the truly adventurous, the Galapagos Islands offer a limited but real property market on the inhabited islands of Santa Cruz and San Cristobal. Property here is expensive by Ecuadorian standards, but access to the Galapagos as a place to live, not just visit on an expensive tour, is something so unique that it deserves mention even if it requires careful saving and planning beyond our base budget. Ecuador's pensioner visa, the Visa de Jubilado, is one of the most straightforward in Latin America. It requires proof of a monthly pension income of at least $800, and once granted, it provides indefinite residency. After 3 years of residency, you can apply for permanent residency, and after 3 more, for citizenship. Ecuador is one of the few countries in the world that allows citizens to hold dual nationality, which is a significant practical advantage. The healthcare situation in Ecuador is genuinely good by Latin American standards, particularly in Cuenca, which has IESS, the National Social Security Health System, available to legal residents, and a private healthcare sector offering world-class care at a fraction of North American costs. Dental and optical care in Ecuador is so affordable relative to North American prices that many retirees on our forums talk about dental tourism as a side benefit of living there, flying back to their home country having saved enough on dental work to offset the cost of the flight many times over. Ecuadorian culture is warm and community-oriented in a way that many retirees find deeply nourishing. The indigenous cultures of the highlands, particularly around Otavalo, which hosts the largest open-air indigenous market in South America, are vibrant and living, not museum pieces. The food is hearty and satisfying. The coffee is extraordinary. This is, after all, South America. And the pace of life in a city like Cuenca rewards people who want to slow down and actually live rather than just accumulate experiences. What I find most compelling about Ecuador for the retiree on a conscious budget is the combination of dollar currency, strong legal framework, mature expat infrastructure, and genuine lifestyle richness. It is a place where your retirement money does not just stretch, it transforms. Conclusion: 10 countries, 10 completely different versions of a life well lived on a budget that, in 2026, still stretches incredibly far if you are willing to look beyond the obvious. What all of these places have in common is not just affordable real estate, it is the possibility of a retirement that feels genuinely alive, where daily life has texture and flavor and human connection, where you are not just existing in a comfortable bubble, but actually engaged with a community, a culture, a place. The $50,000 home is the starting point, not the destination. The destination is a life that surprises you, that teaches you things, that introduces you to people you would never have met and experiences you would never have had if you had stayed exactly where you were. My honest advice, having watched so many people make this move, some successfully and some less so, is this: go first. Spend 3 months in a place before you buy. Let it show you its difficult days as well as its beautiful ones. Join the local expat groups. Eat at the restaurants the locals eat at, learn at least the basic phrases of the language, and pay attention to how you feel when you wake up in the morning. That feeling, that particular quality of morning, will tell you more than any YouTube video ever could. If you found this useful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave me a comment below telling me which of these 10 countries surprised you most. I genuinely read every single one. And if you are already living in one of these places, I want to hear from you. Your real experience is always worth more than my research. I am Julia. I will see you in the next one. Go find your morning.